there's so much we can ask you, and there's so much you have also been in sort of in media telling about your aspiration and your background and how Truecaller became such a big hit in India. But what event happened in your life which made you do something very little but is so impactful to millions and millions of people?
You know, I think there's a lot of different type of entrepreneurs. Me and my co-founder Alan, we were both kind of accidental entrepreneurs, and I don't mean accidental in the form that we kind of you know, just stumbled into a business, but rather that the core of us starting the 3 different businesses that we've run together was always that we wanted to solve a problem for ourselves. And then it just happened to be that there was a lot of other people who had a similar problem. And you know, we got massive scale with Truecaller, but that wasn't necessarily the case for the other businesses. So with Truecaller, what happened was, you know, I was studying for my master's degree at university in Stockholm. So Truecaller is a Swedish, we call it now Swedish Indian company. But basically we started out in Stockholm, and I was studying for my master's at in an international class. And when you're studying in an international class, what happens during summer and winter vacations is that everyone goes back to their home countries, right? And they start to text each other like, hey, what's up? I'm coming back, you know, this week or that week. Do you want to hang out? And I was always wondering, why is it that I can't see the number, see the name of the person who's texting me or calling me? Like, why is it that we're using these mobile phones and we're signing into all these social networks with our phone numbers, but still my phone doesn't know who I am or who you are? And that's basically how we got started. So we thought, we're engineers, we'll build it ourselves. So we built it ourselves and you know, used it for a couple of weeks before we put it up on a forum. This was before the app stores, really. So we put it up on a forum and you know, got a lot of downloads, and then things kind of
Picked up after that.
Yeah, yeah. So after that, we started to call our former bosses and asked if they wanted to invest or if they knew anyone that wanted to invest. And that way we collected our first kind of seed round. And
how much was that? Which year?
This was end of 2009. So we signed on the 23rd of December 2009, just before, well, in Sweden you celebrate Christmas on the 24th of December. So it was the day before Christmas. And you know, we walked around knocking doors, getting all the signatures in the freezing cold, and that's basically how it started.
Very good. Just back on the Indian market, you've done so well in India, and if kind of look your number, I think you got like 125, 130 million user in India, which is very, very large number, and at the same time, India is, you know, the kind of our population demographics are, I think almost 65% of population in the early part of next decade would be millennials, and what are your strategies toward that section of the society and the economy, you know, from user behavior and spend and all that kind of thing, what we see around millennial? Are you doing something? Are you planning something for that part of that population in India?
We see the growth happening mainly with millennials and in tier 2, tier 3 cities. And so, you know, we've always tried to keep Truecaller, develop Truecaller as a brand that stands for trust, someone that you can trust to give you, you know, insightful information at the time when you really need it. And that has been kind of the ethos of developing Truecaller. Going forward, we're also going to introduce some more, let's say, contextual, informative ways of expressing yourself, so expressing feelings, you know, as a way of communication. I think there's a gap in how we communicate today, which doesn't include like how you can quickly just express emotions without necessarily jumping on a call or without necessarily sending a long text message. And that's an area we're looking into, and I think that among youth it'll be a popular feature. That's what we're betting on.
And obviously on the B2B side, you have True SDK, and which is lots of developers have been talking about it, and I know you're promoting developers building from e-commerce to logistics solution providers to integrate this True SDK into their product. Do you want to talk a little bit about it? How does it work, and what kind of features, and how would, from an end user perspective, how would that improve their experience on both on the e-commerce logistics side and otherwise as well?
So True SDK was actually an idea that was kind of incepted within Truecaller back in 2015 when I was in Bangalore doing an event together with Google. And during that event, numerous entrepreneurs that were building apps came up to me and asked me, you guys have already verified so many people and so many phone numbers. And you're already installed on so many phones. So wouldn't it make sense if you leverage that infrastructure to decrease the friction in onboarding for us other developers who are building apps and services to reduce the friction and help us onboard and get people started faster. And we thought about that, and then we started to see what we could potentially do without it being a privacy concern. And out of that idea, True SDK was born. Earlier this year, we launched it, and it's been a phenomenal success. We have fantastic partners, everything from the small app company that delivers your groceries to the ones that do taxi hailing or e-commerce, or wallets. So it's been a phenomenal success, but that was basically how it was born. And when you implement True SDK, what happens is next to your sign up interface, so if you have an OTP kind of sign up, we will have a button there. It says sign in or sign up with or through Truecaller. When the user clicks that button, they just get to accept the information that they're sharing back to the application, and you're done. Basically, you're in as a user, and it takes about 3 lines of code to implement, and it takes about 10 seconds for the user to just, click yes, read the text, accept.
Then you have obviously some collaboration with Bank Bazaar as well, which I think you were enabling a frictionless registration, and those guys are in selling credit products. So what kind of integration you have with those guys apart from the KYC? Is there anything else you've done with them?
With Bank Bazaar, it's an interesting company because they also build their kind of business around trust and being able to know who these people are. So True SDK also actually helps them filter out, let's say, spammy users, so that you can't create multiple accounts and those kind of things. But on top of that, we also work with many partners. Bank Bazaar is one of them, where we're having discussions into this new program that we just recently launched called Truecaller Priority. And if you're not doing calls that are deemed as spam calls, basically if you're making calls that the user actually requested. So for instance, I want a loan and there's a callback to tell me that there's a loan, then we allow you to kind of take ownership of that profile and represent yourself as a business, as a trustworthy business, and kind of we've seen a fantastic uptake in the number of calls that are made from businesses to consumers. Where the number of calls that are actually picked up from these numbers are much higher than the average number of calls. And the calls that come from upsales or those kind of calls, if they have been marked as spam, they continue to be marked as spam. And the calls that come from Truecaller Priority, people trust them more and mark them as spam less. We've also found out.
Something about competition. Who's your main competitor in this space?
There's been a lot of different apps, even built in India, in the US, and so on, that have succeeded to some extent in different markets. I would say direct head-on competitors from like a larger company that others would recognize would probably be Facebook, who launched an app called Hello about a year ago, a year and a half. And so far, I haven't seen, any uptake from on that application. But having that said, we're always keeping our ears to the ground, really listening to our users. What is it that they want? What other pain points can we solve? And doing so, we haven't really seen any other competitors, even new companies starting, that has that kind of mentality of really listening to the users and really trying to understand their pain points and remove them and create trust.
Any counterpart of Truecaller of similar kind of size outside Sweden and in India? Anywhere else in Europe or?
Well, there's companies in mainly China and Taiwan, Korea. There's similar kind of companies. We're still a pretty, a pretty small company. We're 80 people, and we're managing this huge load of, for instance, 150 million users in India. So I don't think that we've seen anyone else having that scale in terms of usage as of yet.
I think some point of time you mentioned about women's safety in India, and unfortunately in this country 65,000 rapes were reported last year, which is a very, very bad thing to happen in anywhere. But is there anything Truecaller doing for women's safety? Because you guys spoken about it some time back.
Well, the reason we got into it was actually during a session with a young group of students when we were doing these consumer meetups. And what we got to learn from them was that they actually trusted Truecaller with giving the relevant information before they, for instance, if they ordered a Ola or a Uber, before jumping into the cab, they wanted to look up the number and really see if this was, if this driver's name matched with the driver name in Truecaller. And a lot of similar cases we've heard a lot of similar cases where, young women really trust Truecaller to give them information, and that creates both a sense of security, but also helps them avoid, things that they potentially find, annoying or disturbing, like late night phone calls and those kind of things that a lot of at least among college students was kind of common and disturbing to them, and they relied on Truecaller kind of taking that anonymity away from those calls, and so people stopped harassing them, or they would block them, and so on. So these were kind of some of the initial things that we heard from the market, and we started to think about what else we can do. So we've actually prototyped a couple of different things, products at Truecaller. We have something every month. We have something we call Lab Days, where our teams basically get together and build whatever they want to build. During several of these Lab Days, these kind of projects have come up. So we're working on, and in general, many of these products that get developed during Lab Days also get shipped. So we're working on these things, and we have a couple of things that are going to come. What is really important to us is that it doesn't just become a gimmicky thing. Build a product that people trust to give reliable information. When there is potentially a danger, you really want to have a reliable kind of partner to help you in that situation, or sending a distress signal. So we're working on that product, and it'll be coming soon. We have a couple of consumer engagements to try it out first. So basically, that's where we are.
The Syrian Electronic Army, which hacked the database, and I think you guys blame the old version of WordPress for that. But lots of young entrepreneurs here, they may not have the perfect cybersecurity mechanism, but what advice would you give, both general and specific for these companies and these entrepreneurs to how to sort of safeguard their customer database and site information?
We had this blog that was, where we put our feature updates, communicating with our users about new features and so on. And the blog was based on WordPress, which is a common tool for anyone who wants to put up a blog. And we hadn't updated, some of the plugins in WordPress. That's how they got in, but they only got access to the blog, actually, so it was kind of worthless data that was anyway public. The rest of Truecaller is all built on, we've tried to replicate bank class security within Truecaller. So it's all isolated systems, they're not connected to each other and so on. I think what you really need to do when you're building a product that manages information like phone numbers and names and so on is to make sure that you have these isolated systems that only speak to each other through authorized channels, basically. And everything else is shut off. So that is, a very basic thing. There's a lot of things you can do around the protocols and how you encrypt information and so on, and which we've also taken into account. So, generally there's a lot of things to read up on online if you want to know more about this. But we try to keep a bank class kind of security. And so far, the Truecaller systems have never been breached.
On this Android versus iOS, or the experience is different. Is there any restrictions on the integration with Apple iOS versus Android? And then also in the sort of longer term, where do you think this is sort of heading to, the whole experience between both these interfaces, especially from a Truecaller perspective?
So what we're seeing is, since a couple of years back, Apple has been, opening up a bit more and more to developers. And earlier this year, they launched what they call the Call Kit extension, which basically enables developers to create massive lists of phone numbers on the particular device to, for instance, protect the user from spam calls and so on. So I actually have today with me Tom Shea, who heads our US operations, sitting right there, and is one of the key guys who spoke with Apple, and we work together on creating the kind of Call Kit extension and continuing that dialogue. So we're obviously hopeful that they're going to keep opening up the platform, which I think is definitely a possibility considering, India becoming a growing market even for Apple.
Fair enough. Just a question on the Reliance Jio. You guys have some strategic alliance with them. I mean, it was at least read in the media. Do you have any special alliance with Reliance Jio? Or probably under process, I guess. With the Reliance Jio, JIO, which is the service.
I mean, I know Reliance Jio, but we don't have any partnership with Reliance Jio at the moment. I think we've obviously seen the fantastic growth in terms of bringing people online that they've contributed with, and making these 4G devices accessible as well. So I think the whole ecosystem appreciates that, and of course we do as well. But we don't have any partnership with them at the moment.
What's the next big market for you?
In our plan for 2017, it says win India over and over again.
If you guys thought about going to Africa or from a scaling up perspective?
Africa is a really interesting market. Africa and Middle East are both markets that we have as high penetration of usage among smartphone owners as we do in India. So, if you meet someone who's from Kenya or Egypt or, Nigeria, Morocco, and you ask them about Truecaller, they say, yeah, of course I know Truecaller. We're basically installed on every smartphone out there in those markets. And they continue to be really, important markets, even, from a scale perspective. What we're seeing, as a next step for those markets is, growing in terms of 3G and 4G penetration. So that hasn't been as quick as other markets, but it's ramping up right now. And, of course, we want to be part of that. So even for the True SDK, we have partners from Africa and so on. So, we keep investing in all of these markets.
Question on your co-founder and yourself. Alan and you had, I think you had 3 ventures together and 2 of them which you exited. So you have worked in the past together, and you have experience of building successful companies and selling. How important is that chemistry between co-founders? I mean, maybe not building and selling in the past, but how important the co-founders sort of getting along across throughout the growth and throughout the kind of journey you had?
The first thing is exiting companies. I would actually say the first company we built was a failure. We spent, about 3 to 4 years building a search engine for, home interior for businesses that had home interior. And the reason we built that was because, we had moved to our own apartments, basically, moved out from home, and wanted to buy furniture. And we didn't want to buy everything from IKEA, which is, in Sweden, that's basically where you buy your furniture. So we didn't want to buy everything from IKEA, and so we built this website for that. But we spent a lot of time on it. We learned tremendously, about just building scale and building product. We learned a lot, but I wouldn't say that was a successful exit. When it comes to the chemistry between founders, what I've found is that Alan and I became friends during our studies in university, and we kind of quickly both felt like we connected in many different levels. So that was probably the main reason. And the reason we felt like we connected was we noticed very similar values. And when I say values, I mean things like letting the chair go to the old lady in the tram, or not raising your voice when you're speaking to someone. A lot of the different things were during our university studies. You meet a lot of people and you realize how different people can be, but we also realize how similar we are. And that was really the core of it. And then it just so happened that we were both, tech geeks, kind of, and we loved our, mobile phones already then. This was 2003.
Who actually wrote the code? Is it you or Alan or both?
So the first code was written by me, and then Alan joined quickly after. We were both engineers. We were both coders. Alan also had some Photoshop skills, so he put together the first logo, like all the icons and everything. We did everything ourselves, basically.
You come from Royal Institute of Technology, and some of your alumni are very, very successful entrepreneurs, from Spotify to Volvo and many others. I mean, do you have any kind of pressure within yourself, kind of coming to that kind of success or popularity? You already are successful and done a great job, but how important is sort of that alumni network, and are you under any pressure? Doesn't look like you're under any pressure.
Well, I think the only pressure that I would have is from my mom to kind of complete my there's always the dream of do a PhD, those kind of things. But no, otherwise there's no kind of peer pressure in the Stockholm. There's a pretty big entrepreneurial stint in Stockholm. A lot of startups and very little pressure in terms of you need to perform. And I think we've gotten better at creating an inclusive kind of startup ecosystem in the past couple of years because of companies like Spotify, there's Klarna, there's Truecaller, there's a couple of other ones, King.com and so
Plus
on.
Angry Bird in the neighboring country.
Angry Birds is there everywhere.